Hello everybody, this is Dean from Motion Media, and this is the second part to our look at Solid Rocks, the plugin for 3ds Max and Vray that helps you control everything in Vray and get really fast results and all kinds of good stuff there. So this is an animation done using Solid Rocks, and any of you who've ever done these types of animations know, interiors, whatever, takes a long time. They can be difficult to pre-calculate in terms of getting all of the cracks right and everything. So this was created using Solid Rocks, where we do a pre-calculation on the light cache and the irradiance map, and then we load that in. We load those two files in at the time of rendering, and it really speeds up the frame-by-frame calculation by a lot, and it's always some percentage. But I've seen it drop what were an hour and a half frames down to 25 minutes. So it's a pretty significant time saver, no matter what project you're doing. And overall, it's a very simple process. Just takes a little getting used to working this way. So just something else I want to point out, the water is moving. That's cool. And we did that, and I'll explain why that's important there when we get a little further. And then the other thing you can notice, which is the most important thing about doing these types of animation, is there's absolutely no flicker whatsoever. This is rock solid. Everything is rock solid. Looks great. Okay. So let's take a look at what we did here. I'm going to open up Solid Rocks. Now I want to point out something that is kind of confusing at first, but makes sense as you use this. When I did the pre-calculation, which I'm going to show you next, I used these settings. I used 1920 by 1080, and I used the Vray 2 interior setting with ambient occlusion included, and then I used it on the good setting. Now, if you're from somewhat of the background that I am, when it's time to render the animation, you always put it on production or high or very good or whatever. You can see I'm 1, 2, 3. I'm 4 clicks down from the best. And what's important is you'll notice that a lot of times good is good enough. I don't think before you knew that, when you were looking at the animation, there's anything there that looks less than high quality. And it does depend. I would say if it's a darker scene, you've got a lot of contrast and what have you, okay, maybe you need to step it up a little bit. But for a really well-lit scene, or a scene that has a lot of light and a lot of whites and that kind of thing, good is good. It works fine, and you basically, by going up to this next level, to very good, or even to production, you add quite a lot of time in terms of the pre-calculation, and you don't necessarily get that much better quality. Okay, so on this pre-calc, all you really need to worry about is in here. And we start it by going to this anim flyout. Now, we're just going to walk through these things and talk about it here. Basically, what you're doing is setting up a few parameters, and then you're saving off these files to be used later when you do your rendering. Okay? So let's just look at these. So interior, exterior, that seems pretty obvious. We're on the interior. Cam speed. My cam speed is slow, but what this really is pointing to or looking at is this number here, the irradiance map every blank frames. And you can see slow does it every 15 frames or fewer frames. Walk is 10 frames and run is 5. And what this means is that SolidWorks is going to go through every 15 frames and calculate the irradiance map and add it to the file. Same thing basically with the light cache. So the fewer frames you have to run a pre-calc on, the quicker it goes. So that's basically it. So I chose where to save this, and I just put it in my directory here. I've learned, as I've done this a few times, that you want to call it something very specific to your file. In this case, I have a pretty simple name, but I'm being very deliberate about naming here when I do these things. Same thing with the light cache. I'm saving it in the same directory. This is a key area. Obviously, you want to tell it what section of frames. In this case, it's 300, but I've had to do it sometimes where it's right in the middle of an animation, from 500 to 800, or whatever it is. And I have had to do this blending from interior to exterior, so that I can have an exposure for the outside that's different from the inside, and then I do a little overlap there in between and blend them together. You can see all these numbers change as we flip these different things, and it also relates to how many frames that we have. Now, I haven't found it necessary to go into all this checking and rechecking and what have you. And basically the way I use it is I do the light cache. I usually wait for it. It usually doesn't take that long, 30 minutes at the most for, I think it was 650, 750 frames. Usually this compute irradiance map does take quite a while. It's taken on a really good machine. It can take 6 hours, 12 hours, depending on your processing speed, because it basically is going to partially render these, and we're going to look at each one just so you can see for yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this and let you kind of see it for a minute, and then I'm going to pause and come back after it's done. So once we've set up all of this and we've told it where we want to save the files and what they're called, the first step is to click this, Compute Light Cache Local. Okay? And again, this just takes a few times to get used to. Okay? And I just want to show here visually what it's doing. And you can see it's almost like they have a really long motion blur on it. And you can kind of see that your scene looks like it's streaking with the movement of the camera. And you can see from here, roughly, this 300 frames is going to take, whatever, a little bit under 2 minutes. Okay? Alright, everybody see that there? That looks starting to come into focus here. It looks like a big blurring of the whole scene. Okay, so we're going to kill that. And then I'm not sure if it's going to work the way I just did it. I think I have to let it finish. Let's just try it and see. So the next step is we're going to compute the irradiance map. And again, this may not work. I've noticed sometimes I have to do this back to back in order for it to work properly. Otherwise, when it computes this part of it, it seems to negate or ignore the light cache. But you know what? It looks like it found it. So what it's going to do is it's going to go through and it's going to render every 15th frame. So out of this 300 frames, there's 21 frames to be rendered. And you see, it's just going to compute all of the pre-passes and then save each one, and you'll get a time with that. And if I go here, this is my directory where I'm saving those files. You can see that everything is saved in there. Okay, it's almost, there we go. So it finished the first frame. Sorry, that was about 51 seconds. So this is going to take about 17 minutes. That's actually really, really fast. A lot of the other ones I've done, they're not that quick. They're someplace between 30 and 45 minutes. But this is good for our example. So we can can this. We get the idea. So how do we now that we have it all calculated, how do we set up an animation to render? And in this case, render over a network. So let's turn this off. We're going to go into our render dialog. We're going to go here to indirect illumination. And now you can see this is already set up, but the default is this, single frame. So you basically have to come into your irradiance map setting, you say from file, and then you go and locate this file. Irradiance map, open. Same thing here. Light cache. From file, you choose the light cache file. And that's it. From there, you I'm doing 300 frames. I'm going to save a file to its network place. And of course, what you have to do, I should mention this because I'm kind of glossing over this and it wouldn't work this way, but you can see that my irradiance map and my light cache are on my C drive or my local drive. If you were going to render this over your network, you have to place this on a network drive. So I didn't do that. But once you've loaded them in and all of that is set up and you've got it saved, you go to do your network rendering and you launch your file. And that's it. Really straightforward. And this rendered basically with 4 machines. It rendered in, I believe it was 3 hours, 3.5 hours, something like that. So this is what they've done is this is everything that I just did. You can do with V-Ray on your own. But what SolidRocks has done for you is help you choose all of the various parameters based on the length of your animation and the quality at which you want to pre-calculate it. One more thing now they do have a section here where you can render the animation. I haven't taken advantage of that just because there's custom things that I want to do, so I've done this on my own in terms of the manual way, doing the first part, doing the second part. And it will tie up your computer during the duration. So it's important to mention that after we do all of that, and we've gone through the animation, we're getting ready to set up the animation to network render, and we choose our from file, and we load our light cache and our irradiance map, that we could go in here and change the quality. We could then, even though our pre-calc is on good, we could then set the render to production. Or the opposite, we could, even though our pre-calc is on good, we could drop it down to medium. I probably wouldn't drop it down to medium, but the point is, this is independent of your pre-calculation. So I have found for my needs in these particular projects that I can get away with using good as my pre-calculation method, and on some of the animations I've done, I've clocked it up to production, or at least very good, for the actual renders. The render times per frame do go up. However, they don't go up to this, completely unreasonable place because you're using the pre-calc. So it can be worth it to kind of do the pre-calc in good and then render in very good or production to get that extra quality boost. So I hope this was helpful, and we will talk to you again soon.